Okay, I hope that my voice is okay. Greetings to our global community, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. We extend a heartfelt welcome to our webinar. We are absolutely delighted to have each and every one of you here today, joining us from different corners of the planet Earth. Let's embark on our collective journey towards knowledge sharing and engaging discussions. Well, today is the World Environment Day, and we came to know that the world is not on track to reach Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water and sanitation by 2030. And it is while any acceleration of progress towards the SDG 6 depends heavily on the productive performance of partnership. Did you know that World Bank has found that organizations who are actively involving youth in project implementation experience an increase in innovation and creative problem solving? Did you know that the International Labour Organization reveals that companies with diverse youth representation in decision-making roles are more likely to have sustained business growth? Did you know that the United Nations Development Programme shows that organizations providing job opportunities for fresh PhD graduates witness an increase in project outcomes aligned with the SDGs? Imagine a world where international organizations effectively engage youth in their work and project, accelerating the pace of change towards the SDGs. Well, picture a scenario where job opportunities are abundantly created, for example, for fresh PhD graduates, myself included, providing them with a platform to contribute their expertise and knowledge. Now, here's the exciting part. You don't need to imagine anymore. We are bringing this topic to life in today's webinar, and we will not only explore the importance of youth engagement, but also delve into the practical strategies, challenges, and success stories. We'll discuss how international organizations can create an inclusive and dynamic environment through partnership that benefits from the energy and innovative thinking of young professionals. So let's explore together how we can collectively make a difference and accelerate progress towards the SDGs. Welcome once again, and let's make this webinar a transformative experience. And before we begin, a few quick housekeeping notes. The webinar is recorded and will be later be made available in IHR video library. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box below. Our team will collect them. We'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. And if you see, for example, a question in the chat box you particularly resonate with, please feel free to upvote it by reacting to it with a thumbs up emoji. To make this webinar interactive, we've also prepared a quick survey with 4 questions which ask about the level of our understanding on the SDGs and their application in your trainings. Please take a moment to participate. This survey will be shared with you after the webinar, and also the results will be shared later. Now, let's dive into our agenda. We have amazing panelists lined up from a Youth Parliament for Water, from UN Water, from UN Economic Commission for Europe, and also from UNESCO. After the presentations, we'll have an exciting Q&A session. We do our best to end the session in 90 minutes, promised. And we have also our seniors from IHR family here, Elpida, Kolokita, Hamso Amparo Lopez and Angelos Findikakis on board with us, who facilitate the webinar with me and will contribute to our discussion. Francisco Pinto from University of Porto is also with me on board, helping with collecting the questions and comments. And by the way, my name is Hadis Mohajarani, and I am a PhD candidate in hydrology from Trier University in Germany, and also a member of IHR family who is going to submit her PhD thesis this week. I promise we'll be out of here at 6 p.m. So rock and roll, let's go. And now, join me in giving a warm welcome to our first panelist, Sarah Breslin, who is an associate expert at the UN Water Technical Advisory Unit. Sarah is from Sweden, but based in New York. She also worked at the Stockholm International Water Institute. Sarah, we are excited to hear from you, and I now give the voice to you to share your insights on today's topic.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hadis. Can you see me okay, hear me okay?
Absolutely. It's beautiful. We
Great.
see that.
Thank you. So as Hadis already said, my name is Sarah Breslin. I'm an associate expert at UN Water based in New York. And before I get into my presentation, I just want to present UN Water as a coordination mechanism within the UN system. So this means that we don't actually implement any projects on the ground on water, but rather we are tasked with coordinating 35 UN entities and 14 non-UN partners on policies and priorities for water. So my focus in the presentation will be how we can accelerate progress on SDG 6, which is the Sustainable Development Goal about water and sanitation. So when we were tasked with defining what acceleration actually means, and I'm quite lucky that I get to go first. So thanks for that. And I think in simple terms, we all know that acceleration is about making progress faster. But this also entails that we need to know what direction we need to head and figure out a way to get there quicker, being agile to any shocks that we may face along the way. And this is absolutely central for water, since we need to go at 4 times the pace that we are going today if we are going to achieve SDG 6 on time, so by 2030. So in a way, to use an analogy, it feels like we have now found the ring. We understand that we need to destroy it, and we have a map, and we know we need to get to Mordor. But it's not enough to simply walk there by foot. We actually need to find a mode of transportation that can get us there faster, and we need to carry tools and a mindset that can help us respond to any issues and problems that we may face along the way. So I feel like this is where we're at with SDG 6. We are not going fast enough. And UN Water has, together with its members and partners, actually identified what these tools could look like that will get us there faster and also be able to respond to any shocks that we encounter along the way. So now up on the screen, I have the 5 accelerators of the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework. So by showing international organizations, particularly those that are part of UN Water, so the 35 entities that I mentioned at the beginning, how youth can be part of these accelerators, both benefiting from them as well as contributing towards them, I believe that engagement between international organizations and youth-led initiatives can become more effective. So the text that you see here are some examples of what can fit under these accelerators, but that text is by no means exhaustive. And I'm going to give some examples of how collaboration can take place. So I won't go into all of them, but I will start with data and information. So we know that age disaggregated data is often helpful for understanding who is affected by the water crisis and understand the gaps on acceleration. But also young people and youth-led organizations and initiatives can play an active part in data collection if, for example, community initiatives are utilized. And this can really be a great resource for SDG acceleration. For capacity development, we often speak about building the capacity of youth to make sure that they are able to best contribute to SDG progress and processes. But however, I would also argue that a lot of capacity needs to be built within the SDG processes themselves on how to involve youth in a meaningful way. And this takes us on to the next, to the last accelerator on governance. Because inclusion and participation fits in under this last accelerator. And many identify youth participation in decision-making processes as a top priority, specifically in the multilateral sphere. So by building capacity of decision makers on how to meaningfully engage youth, these governance structures can also change. And making youth a core part of these processes is not only about, or it's not actually at all about appeasing young people. It's about making decision-making more effective and build greater trust in public institutions. So as an example, it has been shown that youth involvement can contribute to longer lasting cooperation agreements between countries that share a transboundary water resource. So youth involvement can have a direct positive contribution to peace processes. So yeah, these are some ways that youth can work together on accelerating progress on SDG 6. And for the next question that I wanted to address, how can youth-led initiatives reach decision makers and have an impact on SDG progress? Well, first of all, here I just wanted to raise that in order to reach decision makers, it is really important that youth-led initiatives also come with clear asks. Often simply asking for a seat at the table, it's a valid ask, but often it's not enough. And it's important to really say what you want to do with that seat. So two great examples of that, I believe, are in the ECOSOC Youth Forum. There was a session on SDG 6 where key messages on priorities for youth were developed. So really showing what youth wanted to raise in this forum. The Fill Up the Glass campaign also did this really well ahead of the UN 2023 Water Conference, but I will leave it to my colleagues who are more involved in that to speak more about it. So to further answer this question, I've also pulled out the guiding core principles on meaningful youth engagement from the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And I'm sorry that there's a lot of text on this slide. I did not intend for you to read all of it, but I just wanted to pull them out here. So, because I really believe that these principles are key and can serve as a tool for youth-led initiatives to position themselves within policy processes, because this is a document that comes from the UN system that can really be of great use. And I wanted to focus on one in particular, the second one, which is written in blue here, institutionally mandated. So this is a really concrete ask that youth can make on the UN system, and to make sure that the role of youth is reflected in the legal documents of the UN. So as an example, the resolutions that related to the UN 2023 Water Conference that were adopted by the General Assembly explicitly mentioned the importance of the participation and full involvement of young people. And I do believe that this is crucial for the participation of youth that we did see at the conference. So it sort of serves as a foundation. It by no means ends there, but it's an important foundation to have in place. So on this slide, you can see some of the positive figures regarding youth participation at the conference. More than a third of the registered stakeholders were under the age of 35, which we are very happy with. We saw interventions from youth both in the plenary, so where the member states, aka the governments of the world, where they gave their contributions to the conference. We also saw youth do that, so that was great, as well as in the interactive dialogues. There was a matchmaking process where 64 young delegates were matched with speaking opportunities, which meant that youth really featured across the entire program, which is really important. And just under half of the stakeholders that received travel support were also youth stakeholders. But this is by no means perfect, and we can, of course, do better. There were a lot of issues, particularly regarding the tight timelines of the conference, which resulted in a lot of people not being able to secure funding and secure their visas in time. And this we see as perhaps the greatest barrier to youth participation. So In my last few minutes, I want to focus on the next steps after the UN 2023 Water Conference. So as many of you may be aware, a main outcome of the conference is the Water Action Agenda, which collects voluntary commitments from stakeholders from across the world. As of today, there are 825 commitments registered in the database that collects these commitments. And these 825 together show what the next steps are for water. So they sort of path the way towards 2030. And they include commitments from all types of stakeholders. And I wanted to show you the composition here. And you can see that civil society plays a huge role in these commitments, with more than half, or just over half, coming from civil society. And the reason I'm bringing this up here is because I believe that the Water Action Agenda can really be a tremendous resource for the work of youth-led initiatives, not least because each commitment registered in the database has a contact person listed with an email attached to it as well. So I hope that this can be useful for the work of youth groups, not least because you can see what organizations in your country are committing to, as well as what your government is committing to. As a caveat, which is often the case with these types of UN processes, is that the commitments are voluntary. So the UN does not have a mandate to force any commitment holder to follow up. Having that said, the biggest next step for after the conference is the SDG 6 Water Action Agenda special event. Here we as UN Water are going to invite commitment holders to speak on their progress and also, of course, the challenges that they are facing. So this will be the first time that the Water Action Agenda is reviewed after the close of the conference. And we really want youth to feature prominently. So this year we have dedicated a full hour to the program to be youth-led, and we're very excited about that. Another big step, Another big step is the SDG Summit, which is also coming up in September, which marks the midpoint of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is separate from the water conference process, but nonetheless, it's a really great opportunity for youth initiatives to be involved in SDG progress. So there will be a lot of opportunities for youth to engage. And on Wednesday, actually, the conference secretariat of the SDG Summit will be hosting a webinar for stakeholders. So I'm going to post that link in the chat for anyone who's interested in getting involved in the SDG Summit. But just also note that you need to register today in order to attend that webinar. So I know I'm running out of time. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen. It's really been a great pleasure, and thank you to Hadis and team for inviting me. And I hope that I have been able to give you some tools and frameworks that can be useful for youth-led initiatives to engage in SDG processes. And I want to just reiterate that a key aspect is to develop these key messages, to clearly state what the priorities of youth are on a specific topic. And I hope my experience from the UN 2023 Water Conference was useful as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for your contribution. Thank you very much. Now I would like to introduce our next distinguished speaker, Hasmik Barserian, based in France. Hasmik is the president of the Youth Parliament for Water in Europe, as well as a board member of Green Cross France and Territories. She was also the UN 2023 Water Conference delegate, and well, we are glad to have her join us today. Hasmik, we are eager to hear your words. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hadis. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for the organizers to the invitation, and I'm very glad to have this dialogue with senior and young special, and also exchange with all interested people. So there are a lot of things to share today around topic of acceleration and how you are working on that. But first of all, let's remember the context where we are with the SDGs and the SDG 6. So, as you know, the cascading and interrelated crises dominated by COVID-19, climate change and conflict have put the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development on serious jeopardy. According to the United Nations Annual Report on the Sustainable Development Goals, in order to meet the drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene targets by 2030, it means like SDG 6, the rate of progress must be increased by 4 times. But what we are doing to accelerate the pace? Basically now, investments have largely proved insufficient to guarantee universal access, and inequitable access is due to poor governance and lack of specific attention to the poor and vulnerable. It is a matter of life and death, and also a basic human right. But what is acceleration? As my colleague also from the UN Water mentioned, Sarah, that UN Water has acceleration actions and acceleration toolkit as well. And those are initiatives that voluntarily undertaken to accelerate the SDG implementation by governments and any other non-state actors, individually or in partnership. I think the main challenge related to acceleration is to pass from voluntary to obligatory, mandatory commitment. Acceleration also means cooperation, and it also needs to be more traced and also more enforced in some way. So acceleration is associated with coherence and consistent commitments within the various international decision-making bodies. I am particularly referring to the need of strengthening the linkages, synergies between Paris Agreement, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the UN Water Conference to have the synergies between these different platforms and instances and moments of exchange and having the opportunity to decide on something. The climate crisis, which is related to SDG 13, is threatening the future water resources, both in terms of quantity and quality. And this is not only in the global south or in the developing world, but it's also happening in Europe. The European Environment Agency reports that around 20% of Europe and 30% of Europeans are affected by water stress in an average year. The cost of the economic damage caused by droughts is between 2 and 9 billion euro a year, not including the unquantified damage caused to ecosystems and their services. Global projections indicate that demand for freshwater, energy, and food will increase significantly over the coming decades under the pressure of population growth and mobility, economic development, international trade, urbanization, diversification diets, technological changes, climate change, and many other reasons. In this situation, it is necessary to develop the resilience of territories via water resilience to prevent conflict of use, to preserve human health, the quality of the resource and ecosystems, and finally to ensure integrated water management. The challenge we face is therefore both water security and food security challenge. And to accelerate implementation to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 6 and other water-related goals and targets, the European Youth Parliament for Water is a co-initiator and joined its efforts to several actions undertaken on the global level. I will start one of the actions that we joined in 2021 with the Green Cross Association, that the association mobilized various partners from France, Europe, and on global level, and co-constructed 14 concrete proposals for better territorial management of water resources. The proposals were brought together in a position paper called Act 2 of Dunkirk, which was signed by 150 organizations involved in deployment. Those proposals were then taken to Glasgow for COP26 and to New York for the United Nations Water Conference. Those 14 proposals include public participation in water governance bodies, particularly by young people, integrating into resilience plans the effectiveness of access to water and its rational use through SDGs and tools for territorial legal transition, promoting a peaceful approach to water cooperation, creation of a local youth collective, encouraging exchanges and implementation of concrete projects and other important, interesting propositions. Another action, another example of tools that the European Youth Parliament for Water is like involved and is doing with many other organizations is the Global Youth Movement for Water that Sarah also mentioned, but I want to tell a bit more about it. So that the idea started from the World Water Forum, 9th World Water Forum, where the Global Youth Movement for Water was launched. And the movement brings together basically youth-led organization, allies to influence decision makers, increase youth negotiating power, and encourage action around the globe. The coalition is chaired by the International Secretariat for Water, with the support of Swiss Development and Cooperation Agency, other partners, Global Water Partnership, Sanitation and Water for All, Stockholm International Water Institute, WMO, UN Water, and many other partners. Like really a movement that fights against fragmentation of youth voice on the global level. And one of the let's say opportunities to show this movement was the UN Water Conference, where the youth were engaged in. But actually, the movement went to the conference with the Fill Up the Glass campaign and with 5 key demands to decision makers. I will put the link about the Fill Up the Glass campaign and the 5 demands of youth, so you can pass through it, and if you want, you can also join, because already more than 370 organizations are members of this movement from around 70 countries around the world. So there are really huge mobilization of youth on global level. What else I can add about this? Like there are so many things going on that youth are doing their part of acceleration to SDG 6. It's mostly from perspective of the European Youth Parliament for Water is mostly from advocacy work. We were actively mobilized at the COP27 with co-organization and intervention, more than like 5-6 events. COP27, the same was at COP26, and we continue this engagement for other big events and cooperation with big organizations. At the end, I would also like to add that we really must to recognize the capacity of young people to unite, to achieve common global goals, and to build resilience in the face of global challenges. Because youth are key players in awareness raising, implementing educational programs, promoting sustainable lifestyles, conserving water and nature, and cooperating with youth will be beneficial for all sides. And we are ready to share this energy and the knowledge experience that you have with other organizations, with international organizations, and let's build this resilience together. That's all from my side. Thank you. And I'm ready to answer the questions later.
Thank you so much, Hasmik, for your nice talk. Now it's time to pass the torch to our next speaker, Mahmoud Radwan. Mahmoud is a PhD candidate at École Polytechnique of Paris, an expert in water resources and development, and also he's currently serving as a project officer at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. Mahmoud, I'm pleased to give the mic to you.
Hadis, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for your efforts to organize such a lovely webinar, which I'm finding really, really informative. So yes, I'm not going to further introduce myself. Thank you for introduction as well. I am having two hats here. Yes, the UNESCO one, who managed to basically constitute the first groundwater youth network, and also I have the pleasure to be the founder of the network, as well as beside my work at UNESCO, but also I'm currently as a PhD candidate as well in water digitalization in Paris. Without further ado, I'm also happy, very happy that I can see after just 1 year of the launching our network that finally groundwater is a bit visible. I believe like 1 or 2 years ago, it was not so much visible, but after that 2022 year, like we managed to push so hard so that at least it can be introduced in multiple different events. And as you can see from the graph, like almost 30% of the total available water on Earth is actually coming from groundwater. So it really deserves to be there and visible. Going further on what Sarah just mentioned on the acceleration and what does it mean when you mention acceleration, like how it helps, how it's different. I want to just highlight on the 5 accelerators that we all got introduced to during the conference 2023 in New York. Our main criteria was like 5 ones. I want to highlight now number 5, which is governance, because basically when we are talking about groundwater governance and groundwater specifically, because this is my specialty, somehow we might find 4 different barriers that is actually going against or hinders the acceleration of the governance processes. And we'll find like, yes, of course, we're having so much fragmented regulatory frameworks. We don't have much data, and specifically when it comes to groundwater, it's invisible part of the water cycle. So really, it's hard, it's challenging to be able to monitor the quantity, the quality of the groundwater itself. But then also we might manage, or we might also mention the financial resources. Like we don't have adequate financial resources, even specifically when it comes to groundwater. But here I want to highlight like insufficient stakeholder engagement, which is major in all the other aspects of water as well. So when we found that, we in UNESCO we tried to push as much as we can to find a way so that we can increase the stakeholder engagement in different projects that we're running on. And considering that I'm working in the groundwater sustainability and water cooperation, we tried as much as we can starting 2021 to at least make sure to have different actors available. Like this graph also is mentioning like different actors, but for me, my main interest was actually to make sure that youth are actually available. And when we started planning for the 2022 year of groundwater, we found that actually we don't know who should we talk to when we mention youth. We didn't find any available organization on youth and groundwater, to be specific. And then it was really a challenge. And since then we started to have multiple calls with all the available youth organizations to ask them, like, guys, how many people, how many young experts or young professionals working groundwater do you have available in your networks? And then it was a bit of a challenge, but with the support of many other different networks, like the World Youth Parliament for Water. Like I had a lot of talks with Carolina, for example, and many other initiatives, youth-led initiatives, youth organization, other international organizations that's having some youth mandate. And we had focused groups, and then I wanted to build up a case that I can pitch to my superiors to ask them, like, why don't we have our own groundwater network? And actually it started, it was really going well. And then we managed to have like results from this focus group, if I can say, or consultations. How can we make sure that youth are actually involved or important to be at the table? And then that was the brief of our consultations. That first of all, my pitch, or my 5 main key points was, can we make sure that we are not having the same mistakes over and over again without passing the information to the others? That was the main key point, the first key point. The second one, how can we bring innovation without having youth at the center of attention, like modern problems requires modern solutions. And that was the second key point. The third one was we wanted to have within our organization that youth-centric approaches. We're always saying like today's decisions are tomorrow's reality. And can you have decision on tomorrow without having those people who will be affected by these decisions in your table? And the fourth one, how can you reach different people? How can you reach more groups or volume without having access to tools like social media, for instance, or using different technologies to reach out to those people? And finally, how can you have projects that's totally built on capacity building without having capacity building for youth themselves? And those basically were our main 5 key points. We pitched that to the top management, and we managed to get the approval early 2022 to have or to create the first groundwater youth network. And of course, we managed to launch that during the World Water Day in Dakar. And since then, it's newly born network, but we are really proud of what they managed to achieve in such a very short time. We're having pretty small structure, but I would say a very big number of young experts specialized in groundwater. That the numbers are actually surprising us. We're having until now 1,260 different members from 113 different countries in only almost 1.25 year, like 15 months. Generally, I believe we are really close to balance here. Regional representation, it's pretty fine. Although we found, for instance, that we need to work more on Latin America. Maybe that's because of language barriers. Maybe because we don't do much efforts there. But I think it's really great that we're having a General Assembly that can influence or helps us to elect the chair, the vice chairs, rapporteurs, and different committees. And since then, since our launch, actually, it's having really pretty much focused groups, like a lot of different events, engagement in the very big mega events for youth. We are trying to push as much as we can that they are there, they are representing the network, representing the field, and they are pretty active. And of course, we're facing the same exact issues that Hamsik was just mentioning, that like, of course, financial issues, financial barriers, like how can they reach out to different mega events to make sure that the spot is there. And this is part of our actually objectives as a network and as organization itself. So as you can see, almost all the big events, they were there. In 2023, they're also there. During of course, the UN conference, they were pretty much represented. As Sarah mentioned, we were there as well in the ECOSOC forum. We managed to send somebody there. So we're having a lot of plans for the World Water Week as well, and all the different activities until the end of the year. And hopefully, also now we're planning for the, of course, upcoming forum. Just snapshots of what different activities that the youth led initiative is doing at the moment. We have research and monitoring programs led by the scientific committee of the network, that they managed to do multiple activities, multiple research groups, and they managed to get a lot of abstracts accepted in different conferences. The last one was actually in April in UNESCO, with a project that was built and created using a small research group from the network. They knew each other from the network, and they managed to present that. Second one, we participatory, which is something that we're really proud of. We just got this information early in May, that some of the research groups of the scientific committee managed to send a letter to the Minister of Water Resources of India about some contamination in some like small county in India, and they advised them, like they asked them, we can create a youth group that can help you, from young professionals that can help you find innovative solutions. And then that they sent that to the Ministry of Water Resources, and they found a response from the Prime Minister of India, actually accepting the invitation, and told them, like, okay, let's create actually a youth advisory group for all the groundwater related activities in the country. And that's, wow, actually we managed to get some attention. This is what we really meant when we mentioned community engagement. Also another activity, we're having quarterly newsletters, like every 3 months we are producing this small newsletters about the activities, what's new in groundwater, where is the research going, what's the state of art. We're doing quite some activities on webinars, like technical ones, that you should follow if you just follow the LinkedIn group. And finally, as I was mentioning, like, yes, we were there in the UN Groundwater Summit. We managed to have one of the 10 sessions was actually youth forum. We managed to get all the attention there to the youth that were represented there. Almost 18% of the attendees were youth, not much, but I am proud to say that they were all funded. Almost 90% were funded. And then the UN conference, we managed to also send a couple of representatives, the ECOSOC forum, and we managed also during the groundwater forum to present youth declaration on groundwater, and we managed to send that to the main groundwater side event in the UN conference. That we were also represented there, sending the messages from Paris to New York. Also, I love to mention one last slide on how we managed to take the engagement a bit further on how we can see that actually implemented one of our projects in UNESCO, that we're having this is the second largest aquifer in the world, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer. It's one of the projects, if you know that on aquifer, transboundary aquifers, we're having only 7 agreements. One of them is on the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer. So it's one of the projects that we are really proud of. And I'm proud that I'm also managing this project. We managed to reflect that in the project documents of the project itself. How can youth be more engaged in the documents? We mentioned that we need one of the steering committee of the project themselves be one of the youth. We managed to convince the project beneficiaries to have youth capacity building programs and courses being delivered to the national young experts from these groups. We managed to use innovative tools that were proposed by a couple of the youth, and also one of the young from the network itself. There is a scientific committee. One of them is having a small focus group on the region itself and how they can assist further in developing the project document. So that was all. I believe I'm still within the time frame. So thank you. And any other questions, please let me know. And I will send you also a link to the network itself. If you really want to join, just fill in the form and a couple of our members will contact you to take you on board.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. Thank you so much for your presentation and very informative inputs. Now let's move on to our next speaker, Elise Zerat. I'm delighted to introduce Elise to you, who advocates SDGs in her work at the UN in Geneva, Switzerland. And currently, she's specifically working on SDG 6, promoting cooperation between countries on shared water. I know, Elise, that you have a lot to share while you already collaborated as the German youth delegate to UN, I think around 10 years ago. Welcome, Elise. Please take the stage.
Thank you so much, Hadisa, and happy World Environment Day to all. And also a big thank you to already all the previous speakers that summed up everything very well. So I'm just trying to fill the gaps, and I hope I don't repeat what has already been said. So, I mean, we're talking about acceleration, and maybe it's also important to ask ourselves, why do we need acceleration in the first place? So where do we actually stand on the SDGs? And I just want to give you a couple of numbers which I think illustrate where we stand in a very good way, and not only focusing on SDG 6. As you know, the 2030 agenda is not only about one SDG, but 17, and they are all interconnected. So it's good to look at different ones as well. And one SDG that is also close to my heart is SDG 5 on gender equality. And there we stand well, 300 years away from reaching gender equality. That is SDG 5 currently. Then another one, interestingly, just 26 people in the world have the same wealth as half of the world's population. Just another example to also illustrate inequalities. And as you all know, emissions continue to rise unbelievably. So these are just some numbers to illustrate SDG progress. And in the current report from 2023, we see that only 12% of the SDG targets are on track, meaning over 80% of the SDG targets are not on track. That is concerning, and it is concerning not because we talk about statistics or figures or graphs. It's concerning because we talk about human dignity and human rights for all. So we are far away from a world where everybody enjoys human rights and human dignity. So this is a breakdown moment, and now the question is, how can we move from breakdown to breakthrough? And here, young people are critical. All stakeholder groups are, but the 2030 agenda always saw young people as the torchbearers of the 2030 agenda. And maybe also to just have a quick look back into history, not to bore you, but just to give you a bit of context. Youth engagement has been anchored in different documents within the UN system. One has been the World Programme of Action from the year 2000. It has been a very critical document, and then later obviously in the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, but also in 2018 we had the so-called Youth 2030 strategy, which was the first ever UN system-wide strategy on youth, and that has been an important document, followed only 2 years ago by our common agenda of the Secretary General. Now, the common agenda is very important because it presents the view of our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, on how he sees the future of multilateralism and of global cooperation. And there he really highlights that meaningful youth engagement is a must. And also recently he published a policy brief on meaningful youth engagement within the UN system. And he was outlining 3 critical areas that are needed to really see youth as equal partners. And let me just give you the 3 key words. One, and Sarah has already mentioned some of those. One is obviously resources. We need resources. We need the necessary funding to engage and to have young people on board when we, for example, organize conferences. So one is resources. Next one is institutionalization, which means we need to move away, which I also witness in the UN system, from ad hoc processes to more formalized and institutionalized processes, so that youth have a seat at the table and have it continuously and not just in one event. And then obviously accessibility, meaning that decision-making processes need to be made accessible. And this has been like the broader picture, the big picture, the context we are operating in, but I would like to talk a bit about our concrete work and where I see the challenges, because I think also maybe in the Q&A we can get to solutions and have some concrete ideas how things can be changed. Now, the challenges I see are, well, there's a lot of challenges, unfortunately. First of all, resources is already the starting point. We lack resources. We lack funding for participation, but we also lack funding within the UN system to have posts like youth engagement officers in UN organizations. I'm the UN engagement officer, the youth engagement officer for my organization, but I do this as a hobby. This is actually not part of my daily job. Everything I do on this topic is outside my working hours, but this should not be the case. It should be part of my job description, so to say. So this is one thing, lack of resources, and this is a big one. Then Obviously, another big issue is that we have strategic partners, for example, the UN Major Group on Children and Youth, the European Youth Forum, those are major actors and our partners when we organize events, but also those groups, those big umbrella organizations for youth-led organizations are heavily involved in many processes and also like resources and capacity. So how can we also have youth partners that have the capacity to kind of meet the demand of the UN? That's another one. Then also some of our work is quite technical. So it's not always easy to find youth that can speak on a very niche topic. So how can we match, how can we also find youth representatives that can be involved in our work and that can inform our policies, even if it's a very technical niche topic. That's another challenge we face. And maybe just to name one more, the UN system operates on a different pace, and I would also say is less dynamic than youth engagement, meaning UN youth delegates, for example, are changing on a yearly basis. So it's sometimes hard to identify the current representatives when we cannot just, go back and what happens with other experts. We can see this was the expert 3 years ago. We can reach out to them again, but with youth representatives, it's more dynamic. It's changing faster. So sometimes it's also just a logistical challenge that we face that we don't always know. And there we also have to say UNDESA is trying what they can to inform us who the current youth delegates are, but we are not always aware. So there's also a mismatch of information and a lack of information from our side who to contact. So these were just a few very concrete challenges to illustrate maybe what is currently missing to have more strategic partnerships and to have young people really as equal partners on the floor. And I hope maybe we can address some of these aspects in the discussions now. And then what I'm hoping for, and I close with that we really move away from a tokenistic approach to a meaningful partnership with young people. Thank you, Hadisa.
Thank you so much, Elise. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives with us. And now let's turn our attention to our final panelist, Carolina Tarnesi-Mackinnon. Carolina is the president of the World Youth Parliament for Water, and she's based in San Francisco, California. Carolina, we are excited to hear from you, and please take the floor.
Great, thank you. And I'm recently based in San Francisco, so thank you for that. She already introduced me pretty well. I just want to introduce what I'll be talking about. So I'm going to be focusing on introducing my network, so the World Youth Parliament for Water, to kind of prove why I have experience in this space, and hopefully I'm able to answer some questions. And then you know that you can trust me because I work with the World Youth Parliament for Water. I'll be defining acceleration. It's definitely a little similar than what we've already talked about, but I think it's still important to make sure we're all talking the same kind of language. I'm going to be highlighting youth-led actions across the globe, which also comes into play with what Elise was just saying. I didn't focus on just SDG 6 actions, but kind of a wide, like focusing on the wider ecosystem in which water lives and affects. I'm going to be pulling examples of collaboration from the UN 2023 conference. And I'll be ending it with best practices of working with young people, which again, Elise talked about kind of some of the things that I would suggest to help. So she was a really great person to have before me. So there we go. Okay. So who is the World Youth Parliament for Water? What is it? It's a group of passionate young people from various academic, professional backgrounds at varying stages in their careers, generating change at all levels, from from the local community where we implement and concrete actions to the United Nations General Assembly where we advocate for youth participation in the water world. Over the years, the World Youth Parliament for Water has become a recognized and powerful actor in the international water sector, and we strive to be as inclusive as possible to help young people that are passionate about water to reach their full potential. We're creating a community of change makers who can learn and grow together and use their differences to overcome complex water issues across the globe. So a few things to just take away from all of that is it's an inclusive network, meaning you don't need to be a water professional or study that or really know anything to be a part of it. We work locally and we work globally with actions and advocacy. And we are also used as kind of part of our goal is an arm to keep people involved in water, young people involved. So keeping that passion alive and helping people be able to apply change where they want to. So I've introduced the network. This is why you can trust me and why I'm here speaking today. So what is acceleration? Now, this is a little personal anecdote, but I had a very tough time in university with all my physics courses. So when I was told to define acceleration, I immediately remembered all of those horrible physics equations that I used to jumble up all the time that I hadn't thought about for quite some years. But luckily, this acceleration is not just a theoretical equation, but it's an action that we need to take. Acceleration in this context is talking about doing more for SDG 6. The very hard and inconvenient truth is despite what we're currently doing, despite all the work people have been putting in over the last few years, it isn't enough. We've been told this multiple times in many different ways. So why accelerate? And this has already been brought up. This 4 times number, if you're curious, it did come from a study. So it sort of marked where we are in SDG 6 and how much we need to improve. I don't remember exactly who came out with that paper, but I think it was a collaboration. So you can look into that, and there's some really neat graphs that sort of show what happens if we don't accelerate. So yeah, acceleration is needed. And when we talk about acceleration, what we need to do is add action, add people, add financing, all of it. So the accelerators already talked about, and I think that that's a really good way to kick off this conversation. And we need to set bolder priorities and then follow through. So that's acceleration. Here's what are young people doing? So what are young people already doing kind of on their own to some extent within the ecosystem that is water? So I pulled 4 different examples from 4 different regions that I thought were very different in how they tackle our global issues. And I really included this slide kind of, I think Sarah mentioned this at the beginning, that you shouldn't include youth because it's fun or it makes us feel nice, but it's because we really are the keys to achieving the SDGs. And we're very passionate and dedicated. So we have the Barbados Sea Turtle Project. So that's a university. It's promoting the survival of Caribbean sea turtles via facilitation of population monitoring, range state distribution studies, and communications between range states with respect to sea turtle survival. So that's a very academic action that's happening. The Singaporean youth-led climate and environmental groups in Singapore have called the government to boldly accelerate climate change in a collective statement titled An Urgent Call from Singaporean Youth on Environmental Crisis. And this was for the COP last year. So this is a more advocacy line of work. And then moving to the top right of my screen, community-based tourism in Gambia. So in Gambia, several organizations came together to train and build local capacity in their youth for tourism. And I think this is my X factor of my examples, but this one is really important because community-based tourism affects the climate and it also affects job opportunities. And I just thought it was really interesting that this is like a big focus and shows again that young people are everywhere helping tackle SDGs. And then finally, Youth for the Rhine. It's another youth group. It wasn't included in this call, so I figured why not add, so you can see all of the cool things that are happening within youth. And there's other groups too that I didn't mention, but I happen to know this group relatively well. So it's a youth-led initiative intended to motivate younger generations across the Rhine Basin. And the history of the Rhine, I think, is really interesting. So if you're in Europe or curious, I would look into that. I think it's a really inspiring group. But all 4 of these actions are from across the globe, and they're all youth-led, youth actors. I think it's really impressive. So how can we accelerate? I pulled 2 specific examples here from the World Youth Parliament collaboration from the Water Action Agenda that is the main outcome of the UN Water 2023, which I believe most people mentioned already. I want to mention we are not the only network that had collaboration. These are also not the only ones that we worked on. There were many young people at the conference. You didn't have to be present to submit an action. And a lot of my co-presenters mentioned they were there also doing really cool stuff. And I pulled these 2 because I thought they were really interesting, and I think they kind of work together as well. So World Water and Sanitation Workforce Initiative, I won't read all of that. I'll call up. So this is a collaborative piece between the World Youth Parliament for Water, Women for Water Partnership, Aquafed, IHE Delft, Josh's Water Jobs, if you know, and many more. I'm not mentioning everybody, but my point there is to highlight that this is a huge collaborative piece from many different types of actors within water, all agreeing that there is an issue with, young people not necessarily working in water, and what we're going to do when it comes to the day where we can't really fill those job positions. Another great example of like a collaborative piece was this second bullet. So it's 30-30-30. The point of 30-30-30 works with Workforce Initiative. So it's trying to bring more young people in valuable positions across the board at a 30% level. So this is there's a lot of things that it's important, but this helps combat tokenism as well. The idea here is don't just bring one young person to string them along, but have a goal that you're going to have a more diverse set of people on your boards working with you. And this is the World Youth Parliament for Water, the Swiss Water Partnership sponsors, the Global Youth Movement, which has Meek mentioned, and a few other organizations as well. And so the point of this is to say, yes, we aren't doing enough, but we are making strides in the right direction, and we are trying our best to make that difference and come together in a collaborative way, because when we have to accelerate, we can't do it alone. Individual actions are powerful, and it's not saying not to do them, but when we work together, we're a lot stronger and we make a bigger difference. So finally, this is my last slide, and I wanted to end it with best practices for engaging with youth-led initiatives. So I've talked about acceleration, why we need to do it, some great examples of young people already making positive change, some great examples of collaboration pieces that are very recent from the UN Water Conference. And finally, if you're going to do this, how would you do it? So reach out to your local young people that are already doing great things. This is kind of the don't reinvent the wheel. As Mahmoud was describing when he was talking about the groundwater group, he didn't just say, oh, they don't have it, I'm going to start. He did some research. He was reaching out to different youth groups, trying to figure out where we are. Find the gaps and pain points and work together to alleviate those needs. So ask, what's wrong? Where do you need the help? What can we help you with? Don't assume you know best. I think that this is something you should use just at all times when trying to work together, when trying to build partnerships, is trying to figure out the real situation from different perspectives and kind of come together to figure out how to help or how to make the best action from that. And then finally, work with young people collaboratively on new ideas and projects and help establish and maintain continuity. So this is just like the final wrap up piece of when you're working with young people, make sure that you are trying to work with them, not at them or for them. or allowing them to also have that leadership position, not necessarily position, but the leadership role within whatever you're building, doing, or advocating for. So this is my last slide. I also want to highlight that when we talk about acceleration, it's not just one type of actor that's going to get us there, but it's going to be a wide range. I think I went a little over. I apologize. This is my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're not over. You're actually having on a perfect allocated time slot. So thank you, Carolina, and thank you to our esteemed panelists for their presentation. We've now come to an exciting part of our webinar where we open the floor for discussion and questions. Well, this session is an opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. But first, I would like to give a brief overview of the main points from the panelist presentation, just to refresh our minds. Well, while every panelist contributed to the topic by sharing their view and meaning of SDGs acceleration, Sarah covered the 5 key components of the SDG 6 global acceleration framework, and also mentioned key allies for youth participation in SDG processes. And also she told about, she shared some insights from the UN 2023 Water Conference. And Hasmik talked about SDG acceleration shift from voluntary to mandatory action and interlinkages between SDG 6, gender equality, and climate action, and also emphasized youth advocacy at COP26, COP27, and the UN Water Conference. Mahmoud highlighted youth integration in groundwater governance and also shared experiences from UNESCO Groundwater Youth Network programs for innovative groundwater management in the Middle East and North Africa region. Elisa emphasized the meaningful youth engagement for effective decision-making and building trust, a need for moving away from tokenistic approaches. Well, she highlighted way that UN Economic Commission for EU promotes youth voices, like by holding preliminary consultations and then by inviting them over to speak at their meetings. Also, she underlined the need for more consistent youth involvement, especially in technical areas. And Carolina shared examples of youth-led initiatives that are already making a positive impact, and also positive collaborations at UN 2023 that she was involved in. And I like that when she said, reach out, look for young people that are already making and doing great things, and don't assume you know best. Well, it just sparked an idea in my mind right now to create some inspiring concept like a rally cry for our potential discussion series in the future. It might sound a little bit funny, but it goes something like global youth and organizations hand in hand, accelerating progress across every land. I'm not sure about that, but we can think about it more. Well, now, without further ado, let's get started with our first question. Well, we've got questions, and then we condense them in some main ones, like important ones. But I start with the very upvoted questions we received. So, well, I would like to formulate the question like this. We know that young professionals, particularly women, and also those who are physically challenged are still trying to prove and earn their seats at the table. So how can international organizations effectively engage youth in their work and projects, specifically what job opportunities exist within these organizations to provide fresh graduates with a platform to contribute their expertise and knowledge? Or if they want to engage in activities, are there platforms for them to apply? Are they application right now? Are they calls that you can share with us, or any obstacle that you see on the way? So I would be very happy if you can share just your insight on that, and maybe if someone wants to be volunteer, we can start with. If not, we can just go around and just.
Oh, sorry, Mahmoud has his hand up. If you want to go first.
No, sure, after you.
Sorry, I just unmuted. I think that this is kind of relevant to one of the pieces I was talking about in my slide about the workforce initiative. So one thing we don't have is, where are the needs? There's not like a lot of data or studies that say where we need to funnel young talent or where there's a big gap. We just know that there is, and people talk about it, but it's a bit confusing as to where exactly and how can we communicate that better. The second thing is, I think it's difficult when you imagine a young person going to study and, our brains aren't even fully developed, and then you're not really sure where there's a need in water. So trying to figure out how to communicate that these are the spots, whoever's interested can, focus on studying these few things or get experience in these few things. I know that's quite a literal translation, but I think back when I chose my career and I was kind of guessed and hoped that I would get a job and be able to work in water. And it's worked out so far, but if there was, some kind of platform or some way to understand where that is. And then I also think my final point would just be the communication of these roles that are open. So kind of think Josh's water jobs. And if you're not familiar, it's a website that just posts water jobs. That didn't exist before, and I don't know how you were supposed to find water jobs without that. I found my current role on that website and would have never looked at the company if it wasn't for that. So kind of amplifying that, maybe helping that system that's already in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolina. Maybe Mahmoud, you want to add something on that?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to mention two of the points that Carolina just mentioned. So it's great, you saved my time. But I wanted to highlight also on one of the projects that I mentioned in my slides, where we tried to find this type of different opportunities or openings for those young professionals in the region. And then it was actually challenging as well. How can we find these people? But then I wanted also to highlight some of the efforts that's being done with IH Delft, in partnership with UNESCO, on preparing some courses material, like how to map out the water field and how can you actually draw your career path within the water systems. And this is also what we are calling for. Like, we need to make sure that the capacity in each project, the capacity development, each project is being directed to the youth, because mainly we have very generic terms when we call water jobs, but then as professionals, for me, a personal experience, like in Egypt, for instance, we never had like a specific major called water. It's actually environmental engineering, and then from there we go to water, or it's civil engineering, or it's chemical engineering, and then we switch. So it's basically we are still lacking mainly how can we draw or construct some curricula related to the water fields, and will never go without any support from different international organizations. And last but not least, mentioning also Just Water Jobs. It's actually, it's lovely. We are all happy with the platform that we're having now, but let's mention that it's not a sustainable platform. Until now, just is struggling every single time we are talking together that it's not a sustainable platform because it's based on volunteering activities. So until we find a way, how can we construct a roadmap? How can we finance such thing, or how can we fix it somehow? We're all very vulnerable, I would say, to something similar. So this is something that we need to think of. How can we sustain these type of initiatives?
Thank you, Mahmoud. Elisa, would you like to build something upon or add some comments?
Yeah, maybe just from my side, to mention one channel that I find quite useful to stay updated on what's happening within the UN system, not specifically on SDG 6, not specifically focusing on water, but youth initiatives that are happening around the UN system and where young people can engage in, is the newsletter of the Youth Envoys Office, where a lot of UN organizations ranging from UNEP to UNESCO and so on are contributing. So I put it in this chat, and maybe after the webinar it can also be shared with participants. It's a link where it's easy to sign up, and it has a lot of good information, and it's just once a month, so it's not spamming anybody. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Elisa. Sarah, would you like to contribute your comments?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Hadis. So Josh's Water Jobs has already been mentioned here, and it's a really great resource, but there are some issues, as Mahmoud mentioned already. But speaking from a slightly different perspective, so not from necessarily the job aspect, but if you are part of a youth organization that wants to get involved in youth processes, I really encourage you to look up the major groups. So the major groups within the UN system they're like a collection of civil society organizations, and they are organized thematically. So youth initiatives on water often give input into UN processes through the major group. So if you can't join as an individual, unfortunately, but you have to be part of an organization. But this is a really great way to give input into these very important processes that actually, for example, if you work in the UN system, you can't do that because these are only for civil society. So that would be my main tip.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing. Well, maybe Hasmik, you want to add some quick comments on that?
Oh, well,
you want to share some links? You already,
yeah. There are some organizations, associations who are periodically sending the newsletters, but there are more information for you that you can use, you can take part. So I'm putting the link in the chat. One of them is the Butterfly Effect Coalition related to youth in water actions. The other one is community of women in water. There are also opportunities there. And yeah, I'm just checking my email, and from there I'm sending to remember the names of organizations. So I'm putting the list of organizations there who are sending information that can be useful for you with opportunities. Yeah, there's also the IWA, which is you're sharing a lot of information for you, a lot of opportunities.
Thank you so much, Hasmik. Well, we have a lot of questions, but we are running out of time. I just have one question here. Maybe you can answer whoever wants in like 20 seconds if you have already some input available. Maybe you can, it's a question that I've frequently received. Is there any financial support system for the young professional who would like to participate in the global events. This is the first one, and maybe how they can grow their networks and they connect, collaborate with the seniors in this work. Well, whoever wants to contribute, maybe in 20 seconds, 30 seconds.
So I raised my hand, so I'm just going to go ahead. So just to answer short, again, I'm going to revisit the major groups because they also have funding spots for these global conferences. It is unfortunately, of course, limited, but the more that we can push these major groups to have more funding and so on. But this is like the official stream that you can attend these types of conferences. Yeah, so those are my 20 seconds up, I think.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, we will share the links later on, but well, as our discussion comes to a close, we have other questions, but I think we have a limited amount of time. I have one last question for you, just in 30 seconds. If we plan to continue these gatherings, exploring the theme of cooperation and accelerating SDGs, what are your thoughts on the subject or the focus for our next webinar? Well, moreover, would you be open to introducing other leaders from your own organization or other organization to join us and share their perspectives? Just in 30 seconds, if you have some comments for us. Maybe Hasmik, you can share your thoughts.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking that today in general, our presentations were like for youth capacity development, but it will be also, I think it's also very interesting for people to have presentations with SDG 6 and another SDG, and every speaker can talk about this. Like one person can talk about SDG 6 and SDG 1, and the other one is SDG 7, but like water and energy or water and health. And this nexus is to see what happens and how the different sectors can cooperate, because the aims at the end are same, but they are not aware really, and they can cooperate and have better impact. So I think it will be interesting to have this kind of an event, a webinar with this X. Thank you.
Thank you, Hasmik, for sharing. Well, Carolina, do you have some answers or some feedback to this question for our next webinar, or would you be willing to attend again or introduce someone from your own part?
I love Hasmik's idea, so I want to put a +1 there. I would definitely attend, definitely love to recommend someone. And I think something that could be interesting is maybe focusing on how SDG 6 touches all the other SDGs, so on Hasmik's idea, and then also all of the different key players within SDG 6. So highlighting that it's going to take a team, and what would that team kind of look like. So I'm a really big on like bringing, very hardcore science together with maybe a bit more of a intense advocacy with some storytelling and art. And why do you do that? Why does that matter? And how positive of an effect it can have. I love the full scope of water and everything it can do.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so very much. Elise, sure, please.
Yes. Just quickly, I think we just actually mentioned during this webinar one very interesting topic, which is how to get prepared for job markets. But I want to add more to it, like how will be the water jobs in 10 years, because I believe that the landscape is changing. Digitalization is here. It's 4.0, water 4.0. How can we see ourselves there? I think that will be very interesting talk, like how artificial intelligence changing the whole field.
Like what will be the job opportunities in the future in water sector?
Yeah, so you can start preparing from now. if you still have
that's lovely. That's lovely. Okay, Elisa, would you like to add some feedback in 10 seconds to the question?
I think everything has been said, and I leave you the floor, Hadisa.
Thank you. And so we asked from Sarah from the final question. So 5 seconds, Sarah, 7 seconds.
Sorry, I think
about the focus.
Angelos has his hand raised, so I'm going to give my 5 seconds to Angelos.
Good, good.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists for these excellent presentations, and they're very, very informative too. I would like to make 2 points. One is following on what Sarah said in the beginning about emphasizing the importance of institutionalizing the mandated involvement of youth. I would like to take this inside the technical and scientific organizations like IHR, because we do have groups and committees focusing on specific technical issues, like we have a working group on the Sustainable Development Group goals. And we also have groups of youth, like the Young Professional Networks, the YPNs, as we call them. But we haven't made an effort to bring the two together, even though of course, some young people may voluntarily involved, but on their own initiative, get involved in the working group and sustainable development groups. But maybe we can make a systematic effort to invite, for example, a representative from each young professional networks group into the working group on the sustainable development goals, and other scientific organizations that may have similar structures, and young groups should try to sort of institutionalize the involvement of their young members into the technical committees. The other point that I would like to, that I noticed in one of the presentations, was the subject of intergenerational knowledge transfer. And I would like to stress that, for the most part in the past, of course, young professionals think that they have to get knowledge from and they try to get knowledge from their more senior counterparts. But it's important to emphasize that also the senior people in the organizations can learn a lot from the young people. So basically, my point is that I would encourage the young professionals to speak up, and don't be afraid to express their opinion and their thoughts, because sometimes, if someone, I remember that when I was starting, I thought that those who were more senior knew everything, and I knew nothing, but this is not true anymore. So I would encourage very much the young people to speak up. And the last point is that Carolina mentioned many specific projects that I think would be good if we can make a connection again between technical organizations like IHR or IWA, other organizations, and specific projects, and like some of which, of course, are led by civil society organizations like some NGOs and so forth. I think making this connection can benefit both. So thank you for this. That's all.
Thank you, Angelos. Very, very nice insights. Well, we are at the end of the time. I just want to give some seconds to our seniors from IHR, Elpida, Amparo, or Tom, if you want to contribute to the contents by like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, would be great to have you here. Just go ahead.
Hey. Can I just mention something? Of course, thank you all for your very interesting contributions and information that we got from you, because, you young people all across the globe can generate the idea, the energy, the hope that we now need to go further in the future. Just to mention that we had some various in IHR collaborations with different groups in working with young people. I only just want to mention that we had a collaboration doing an event last year, an online water congress together with UNESCO, as I have another hat also being the director of the UNESCO Center. And we are in following the Dakar World Water Forum. And just I wanted to invite you, because we are going to again organize a World Water Youth Congress in Bali 2024. So I urge you to be a part of it, to co-create, co-organize this event, so that you can give us your ideas and you could be part of this event, just that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elpida. Thank you so much.
This. I would like to add just some words. Well, I want to thank everyone who has participated and everyone who has made possible this webinar, this moment to share. And I would like to put in value how important is association for young people, because it's very, very, very interesting for us to share. And our hydraulic and environmental hydraulic research, which is our topic, is really focused on this. So we are very happy to host this sort of initiatives, joining, mentoring, sharing, because it was born from a conversation that Hadis said. I wanted to, after our mentoring session in Granada, in our meeting. So I am very happy to see that we have made a small idea and we have been made this grow. So how important it is for us to share and to show young people the possibilities that the entire world is prepared for receiving. So our experience with young people is absolutely huge, and we are very happy to host this sort of initiatives and to know what you would like to do. Of course, we are promoting on the future Water 4.0, digitalization, future needs, and all this is really in our interest. So we are really thankful for the people involved and open to all your initiatives in order to make possible this sort of meetings, which are in the soul of the organization. So my words are for thanking and for showing you our association and for promoting all this in future in any way. Thank you, Ola.
Thank you, Amparo. Very nice. And Tom.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to be as quick as I can. I know we're a little bit over time. I have 2 or 3 small messages. One, to all of the audience who have tuned in today, thank you very much for joining. And because IHR is a very diverse network of sometimes very specialized and sometimes very broad specialists, I do really encourage you to get in touch with our technical committees, our working groups, and all of these specific areas, because they will allow you to connect to the SDG process through various sources. Point number 1. Point number 2 is to all of you, and it's such a great, refreshing scene to see so many different youth organizations here. I can tell you it was only 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't have seen any of this kind of stuff. It was all talk between people like Angelis and me and Amparo, and it wasn't really any action. So it's very refreshing to see this, and this is new, so you've got to keep the energy going. We have at IHR a very dynamic and very strong young professional network. There is a task force that's dedicated to this, so I really encourage this network of different youth organizations to continue working together. This is really important, and it's new, okay? This didn't exist before. So this is really important, and that we maintain this. And then thirdly and lastly, Thank you to Hadis for organizing this, to everybody for participating. I do hope that we pass to action now, and I think lots of ideas were raised today. Thank you, Hadis. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Well said. A big thank you to our fantastic panelists for taking the time to join us from different parts of the world, despite the time difference with Europe. I thank all of you, beautiful tribe, for joining us today. Please stay connected. The resources and links mentioned today will be shared with you in our website and via email. And I encourage you to share your ideas on today's webinar and also for the continuation of this journey. Did you learn anything today that you feel you could possibly consider in your own career development? Well, as we wrap up this session, this meeting, let's just remember the power of dialogue and collaboration with other communities. As we expand our capacities and embrace digital tools, we just globally surrounding ourselves with good-hearted individuals, regardless of our current position. We just gather to learn and help each other, and so we can try our best together to contribute to accelerating the progress. But what I always try to remember first is, as individuals, what we can primarily control is doing a quality job. I think what we really can control is how we can make a good art, no matter where we are on our journey. We need good people in this work. We really need good people in this work. Have a great time and hope to see you again soon.
Congratulations all, this spectacular webinar. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Hadis.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye.